The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more.
So, if you're producing these the right way, then they can be very complementary to existing technologies. And our view is that the on-ramp for perovskites is much shorter than what people think, because you can marry this with a crystalline silicon module. And that will boost the performance of that module by about 20 to 30% and drop the cost of energy by about 20%.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our hosts Tim Montague and John Weaver bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, the next generation of solar panels. My guest today is Scott Graybeal. He is the CEO of a company called Caelux, and they are developing perovskite-based coatings that will be integrated into traditional solar panels, making the next generation of solar panel. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Well, thank you, Tim. Glad to be here.
Many of my audience know about perovskites as largely a laboratory, R&D, next generation technology. And it's been around since, I think, 2009. So it is maturing. And but you and your team there at Caelux are really making a run at bringing it to market. So Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then let's get into what Caelux is up to, where you are, and where you're going.
Well, happy to do so. So I've been in solar for about 15 years and started off in the turnkey capital equipment world for thin film silicon and migrated into the crystalline silicon world. And then I had the pleasure of running the energy business at a company called Flextronics, which was a large contract manufacturer. And I ran the energy business there, and we grew that from about $300 million in revenue to about $2 billion in revenue over my 7 years there, and did some fantastic acquisitions along the way, the biggest of which was Nextracker, which is now the global leader in single axis tracking solutions. So it gave me some great insights on what it takes to scale new technologies in the solar space. And it's a complex equation to solve, and it's a combination of strategy, product, relationship. It's a mix of all of those things. And I think you highlighted it very, very well. I think here in the United States, I would say a lot of folks are prejudiced by the concept that this is still a laboratory scale technology. And the reality is, well, we've ramped 50 megawatts of production capacity in Los Angeles. So that's not quite lab scale anymore. That's demonstration scale. And there's plenty of proof points in China of companies that have shipped multiple megawatts of perovskite modules in their various stages of testing, qualification, into projects, in harsh environments. And I think our paradigm needs to evolve here domestically. We have to recognize that this is an emerging technology. This is an opportunity for the West to take another bite at the apple of PV, because PV is not going away. In fact, it's becoming a larger fraction of our overall energy mix. And we have the technology here domestically to compete and win on an international scale with the right level of support. And so I think that with all that said, that pathway to commercialization is much shorter than everybody thinks. In fact, we're talking about commercialization in early 25. So that's just around the corner. And that includes all the little bumps in the road that, startups typically see, and bringing new technologies to market, you'll generally see. So, we're very enthusiastic about this technology, and it's not something that you need to look at 2030 for. It's something you need to look at next year and say, gee, I'm going to buy perovskite modules, 4 terminal modules in 2025.
Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, what we're doing with solar PV is bringing down the long-term cost or the levelized cost of energy. And the holy grail is a penny a kilowatt hour or $1 a megawatt hour. And that unleashes things like green hydrogen at scale. And as you said, solar PV is going to be 50% of the grid by 2050. We're going to 10x the industry. It's not a question of if, but how quickly. And then, there are two kind of major competing technologies, crystalline and thin film. We have a native American company called First Solar that makes thin film panels. They're really the only game in town for thin film at scale, and they're making a run at it. They're very popular with utility scale solar. They are more expensive for smaller scale for DG, and so you don't see thin film in DG. And then you have perovskites, and set the table for us. This is high tech material science, nanomaterials. Right. What are perovskites? How do they work? How are they different? And how do they complement traditional crystalline PV?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm not a PhD physicist or material scientist, so my apologies in advance. So I'll bring it to my level, and that hopefully this works for the audience too.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, perovskites are really just a special class of synthetic nanomaterials that, when processed under the right conditions, make very low cost but very powerful solar cells. And as you talked about, they were discovered in 2009. Now, perovskite is a naturally occurring mineral, but it has nothing to do with that. It's just the crystal structure is the same. And that's why that they call these synthetic materials perovskites, because they have the same crystal structure, technically speaking, as this naturally occurring mineral perovskite. So, if you're producing these the right way, then they can be very complementary to existing technologies. And our view is that the on-ramp for perovskites is much shorter than what people think, because you can marry this with a crystalline silicon module. And that will boost the performance of that module by about 20 to 30% and drop the cost of energy by about 20%. And this is exciting, not just for folks in the resi space or in the commercial space, but also the utility space. And this is where we see the most pull, is actually in utility scale solar developers. And some of our investors are in that world. And so they look at this and say, gee, when can this possibly come out? And so we'll be launching a pilot project second half this year to go and demonstrate this technology as what we call a 4-terminal hybrid tandem module. It's a mouthful, but basically means that it's perovskite coated top glass with the perovskites on the underside. It's laminated in the module and electrically connected in parallel to the crystalline silicon cells. And so we can do that for a number of reasons. It's passively done. You don't need complex electronics, and it's still just 2 wires coming out of that module. It's not 4, it's 2 wires coming out. We make that connection inside the module, and it's very simple for module manufacturers to integrate this. And what they get ultimately is a product that has between 5 to 6%, sometimes 6.5% improvement in absolute efficiency. So you're producing a 20% module today, it's a 26% module. If you're producing a 22, it's a 28, etc. So that's why it's attractive. And we're very conscientious about the cost, right? And so I've been in PV quite a long time, as is our co-founder, as is our CTO, and we know that cost is an incredibly important feature here. And so we price it such that for a module manufacturer, their cost per watt's flat. Yes, it costs money for this, but the number of watts go up at the same rate that the cost of the module goes up. So their cost per watt's flat. How they choose to price it to the end user, that's up to them. But we know that there, for every 1% of efficiency, there was about a 2-cent difference in market value. And that's because the balance of systems cost. And one thing that's true is that there's really 2 drivers today. One, balance of systems costs are not getting any cheaper. And there's some great technology solutions out there, but we haven't seen mass adoption of them, but they're not getting cheaper. Civil works are increasing in cost. So balance of system costs are going up. Demand is continuing to go up for solar. And at the same time, we're seeing issues around land use. And we used to think that was never going to be a problem, but now it's really becoming an issue. People talk a lot about not in my backyard for large PV. So how do you optimize these oddly shaped plots of land and where you've got land constraints? Well, you need a very high performance system that doesn't break the bank. And that's what we promise. And that's what we deliver to the market.
So did I hear you correctly that the perovskite gets embedded in solar glass that becomes that replaces the traditional glass on a glass module?
That is correct.
Okay. And is that potentially the same for bifacial, that you have front
Yep.
and back?
Exactly. In fact, we prefer to have glass laminates.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges with perovskites is they don't like water and they don't like some oxygen. And so you have to be conscientious about that. And the best barrier that's out there is really a glass backsheet.
Okay.
So very complementary to bifacial technology.
All right. And so there's historically the things that I'm no expert on perovskite solar, but I try to stay abreast of the technology. The things that I've learned historically, the challenges for perovskites are they tend to be short-lived, relatively speaking, right? And they potentially include hazardous materials. So how have you addressed the lifespan, improving the lifespan? Because the solar module has to last for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Does the degradation rate of the perovskite piece of the solar, is it different than the crystalline piece?
Yes, and it will be for a little while. We've made some tremendous strides at Caelux in improving the lifetime of perovskites. In fact, I think we've got some best-in-class results. So we're not very far off our commercialization target for the large format devices. But there is a difference in slope, right? So there is a faster degradation of perovskites. Now, if you put this together in our architecture, this hybrid tandem architecture, you could still have a faster degradation of the perovskite, but in combination with the silicon, it will still have more power at the end of 25 or 30 years than it would without the perovskite layer. And so it may change, let's say, that slope of degradation, but you're starting off with a much higher power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be up to the module manufacturer about how they want to convey that to the market. Do they want to derate? Do they just want to take credit for that? And I think ultimately they're going to take credit for it. But, because of that, if you're able to marry the two technologies together, that gives you a faster on-ramp time for perovskites, because that's a pretty compelling value proposition. It's like, yeah, maybe the slope's a little different, but I'm still going to have more power than if I just had a crystalline silicon module alone in that year 25, that year 30. And developers recognize that. They go, yeah, absolutely. And they understand that completely. Now, as perovskites get more mature and we start seeing 25, 30-year lifetimes with perovskites, then standalone perovskite modules start looking pretty interesting because it's a lot cheaper, right? I mean, the cost of a perovskite absorber is, going to be half that of a crystalline silicon cell, if not more so, over time. And so, as one of my colleagues, not at Caelux, but one of my colleagues in the industry likes to say, the absorber is virtually free. And there's a lot to be said for that at scale. And from our standpoint, we've already hit our cost targets this year for direct materials, and at a gigawatt scale, it's a simple thing for us to solve for. We've already got quotes and prices in-house that we know exactly where we're going to be.
Mm-hmm. And what about lead in the perovskite? Do you have to use lead, or are there alternatives to using lead in the perovskite?
Well, unfortunately, mankind has found lead to have some fantastic properties that we just can't get around. It's a big fuzzy atom that just has lots of electrons, and because of that, it tends to lend itself to some pretty interesting geometries. And so it is very, very useful. Now, the amount of lead that's used in a perovskite cell is a fraction of that what's already in a crystalline silicon module, even when you account for the difference in solubility. And so, as our CTO likes to say, is that you could take a perovskite module and drop it face down, perovskite in the dirt, and the amount of lead that will leach out won't go above the background amount of lead. And so it's a very small amount of lead. Now, notwithstanding that, we know that some folks are very sensitive to this. And so one of the things we do with our product is that we have traceability. So every one of our glasses, our active glasses, go out with a QR code on it. And so they're completely traceable, so we can go cradle to grave with it. Yeah. And these are simpler to recycle than you'd imagine, right? It's a fairly straightforward process to recycle that perovskite material. So it's effectively, mild surfactants and hot water that can really help you reclaim that material. And so we do definitely see a cradle to cradle approach in a circular supply chain that can be enabled. That's much easier than traditional solar. So But I think that as long as we kind of have that right stewardship around the management of the devices and have that approach where we can trace things over time, but also recognize that we're talking about a very, very small amount of lead. There's, let's say, I mean, here's a way to visualize it too, is that the amount of lead, correcting for solubility, the amount of lead that's used in the automotive industry, if that was converted into, in 1 year, if that was changed into perovskite panels, that would be like 2.5 terawatts, which would be enough modules to go back and forth to the moon 11 times. So that's a significant, it kind of puts this scaled issue. And not too many people are freaking out about the fact that they've got a lead acid battery or 2 or 3 in their garage right now.
Yeah.
And even if you're driving a EV, you still have a lead acid battery that's powering all of your instrumentation loads, right?
Yeah, and the key there is circularity. You see this with First Solar, of course, right? They have a cradle-to-cradle approach, and that really has worked for them. They use cadmium telluride technology, right? Cadmium is a heavy metal in the same class as lead. Totally doable. And so I think you're answering that objection pretty well, have to say. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more. So what is the status of the company? You're a venture-backed company. How many employees do you have, and what is the go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, so we have 72 employees today. We have an office in Taiwan, and we have our operations in Baldwin Park, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, about 15 miles north and east of downtown LA. And that's where we have our 50 megawatt demonstration line, and we'll be scaling that up this year as well. So we are in the process of raising a Series B, and so our insiders are participating, as well as some great companies and great firms coming in as well to participate. And the intent for that will be to take us to our gigawatt scale plant. And so that's what we're looking at for our next expansion. And location TBD, right? And that's going to be a function largely of the strategy that we have. And our strategy is to work with module manufacturers. Our perspective was, look, it's tough for a startup company to have credibility when you're dealing with these large project developers, and they're the ones that have the most volume. So we have to work with the best PV manufacturers in the world to commercialize the technology. And so we have 3 of the top 5 manufacturers in the world are currently in demonstration and qualification phase for our product, as well as another 9 others that are more regional players that are in key regions for us. And so the way we approach it is that our intent is to go build sites that are regionally specific. So we'll have a site in Southeast Asia, a site in India, a site in the United States, and maybe a site in the EU somewhere, right? And that will enable us to reach out and touch all the PV module manufacturers, and that we can support them geographically. And so our model is that we consign glass from customers, we coat the glass, and then we ship it to their module manufacturing facility. And with our site in Los Angeles, and our next expansions are likely going to be in the Southwest United States, we have customers that will have operations there too. And so, as that glass comes in, likely to be imported, comes in the Port of Los Angeles, pit stop at our site first, we coat it, and then we send it on its way to our customers. And we consign glass because, well, we're a startup company. We don't want the working capital impairment of having to buy glass and have it sitting on the shelf. And plus, our customers have tight relationships with glass manufacturers, and frankly, can get better pricing for glass than we can. And so our business is largely about the transformation of that glass substrate into this Caelux active glass that can then be incorporated in the module.
Let's take a quick side branch and talk about solar glass, because, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a 10% adder for domestically made products. But in the U.S., we don't make solar glass today. Now, I don't know what percent of the price of a solar module that is, but it's something that it would be nice if we could do. But where is solar glass made today, and where are you going to be getting your solar glass?
The bulk of it, frankly, is in China.
Yeah.
And it has been for quite some time. Now, the type of glass that we need and the type of glass that thin film needs is different than what you see with typical solar front glass. The typical solar front glass is what's called textured glass or rolled glass. And it's a little bit different. And because it's rolled, it doesn't have the flatness that you need when you're doing thin film processes. And that's something that'll be overcome with time. We fully intend that we'll eventually be able to do that, right? But as it stands today, we prefer float glass. And so you don't see a lot of low iron float glass. You don't see a lot of low iron textured glass either. And so there are companies that are in the space. There are some manufacturers that are coming to the United States, and they're fulfilling the needs of some of the folks that you already touched on, almost dedicated to their operations, right? Because they can write a big check and they can lock in these long-term offtake agreements. And so many of our customers, though, for the U.S. operations, they're likely going to be importing glass. And it's either going to be Southeast Asia, where there are some operations, or it's going to be from places like China. And even inclusive of any sort of tariff implications. And I'm not 100% on the tariff. I think it's 25% for solar glass. I'm not, but even though I'm not getting interviewed, don't quote me on that. But even in consideration of that, the cost is much lower than we could see in the U.S., unfortunately. It just is.
Yeah.
It's roughly half the cost. And so that's something that I think that U.S. manufacturers need to get their head around. And this is why we also, from an advocacy standpoint, are pushing for kind of an extension of IRA to include dimensions of the supply chain. We feel that that's important because, yes, we can have all this great, let's say, primary product or secondary product manufacturing, but we need the primary products to actually be cost competitive too. And so how do we get there, right? And I think that is going to take some help.
Yeah, I Googled this question now about glass and First Solar, and it does look like they are partnering with a company that is building a glass factory, a float glass factory in Ohio.
Yeah, and somebody I think in the Carolinas too, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they got the scale to do it.
Yeah. So you're in the pilot phase. You said you have a line for 50 megawatts a year, and module manufacturers are testing the product. So they're buying just sheets of perovskite glass from you, or what exactly are they buying from Caelux?
Yeah, they're buying what we call the active glass. And so that is that perovskite coated top glass that also has a capping layer so that we can ship it safely to their sites. And we've already started shipments, and that's really going to ramp up this summer. And so that's when the bulk of this testing work is going to continue. So we've got some early customers that we've been sending product to, and they're evaluating in different parameters, and we're qualifying the product on this line. And I would really call it a demonstration line. Our pilot was really when we were working with smaller substrate sizes. And so this is our demo line, really to prove the concept, prove the price points, prove the performance, and then really set the stage for a larger scale deployment, right? This gigawatt scale plus. And so, yeah, that's what we're shipping to them. And so they're going through various tests themselves, right? Some of it they're keeping close to the chest, some of it that they're freely sharing, but we'll be laminating this glass into their module architecture. We work with them on, hey, what's your module look like? What do we need to do to make our glass actually fit your module configuration? And it does change. Depends where they put junction boxes. It depends how they array the cells. But we've got flexibility, and we can work with them on that. So our size is about 2.1 square meters. Now, the industry is going to larger glass sizes, and so that will be our next expansion will be about these larger glass sizes. But for the most part, we're able to get this first rung of qualification and sales done at that form factor.
Cool.
And the site sold out for the first 18 months, so we're pretty excited about that. We just need to get through qualification.
And when do you foresee achieving some level of sustainability in terms of cash flow, becoming cash positive? What does that runway look like for you all?
Yeah, 27. And that's because we do have a model that, we do need to invest. And we are working with various structuring options and how we bring capital in for CapEx, et cetera. But 27 will be in a great spot.
And at that time, how big will the company be, and what will your production be?
Yeah, we'll have over a gigawatt of production by that point.
Okay. Well, I don't know what I don't know, Scott. So what else should we know about Caelux? I'm just thrilled to have you on the show and let our listeners know about this and potential investors. What is the call to action for potential investors? What is it that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think we need quality investors to support the vision of really transforming the solar industry. And there's got to be, I think, a broad recognition that solar needs to evolve. I think some have sort of dismissed solar to say, oh, it's fine the way it is. The reality is our developer partners are telling us the exact opposite. They're telling us they want more powerful solar that costs less because they want to begin to really take advantage of the market dynamics as they're laid out today. And that's dealing with land constraint and it's dealing with rising BOS costs. And we are the solution to that. And so I think that with a recognition of that, that begins to narrow the field quite a bit. And I think this is a company that has done a good job in retiring risk and as it's continued to evolve. And this demonstration line is the largest of its kind in the Western world. And we're well positioned to go and intercept this evolving industry. By 2040, more than 80% of all PV shipments are going to be perovskites. In fact, that's a pretty low estimate. And with that, this is the frontier of a huge transformation. And because of the degree of automation and because of the degree of how far we can drive direct materials costs, this is not just a China-only game anymore. We can automate and really take many of these factors that informed China's success in PV 2.0 and reset that paradigm. So now we've got the ability to have a handful of people running a gigawatt production facility because it's an automated inline production asset. We have the ability to really drive down direct materials costs because there's no exotic materials we need to work with. And so given that some of those fundamental dynamics, it does create a new opportunity. And PV 3.0 looks very different than PV 2.0. And so now's the time to really look at quality companies like Caelux and say, hey, that makes sense. That's a company that's learned the lessons of PV 2.0, and we have that experience ingrained in us. So we feel that we've got the ability to really fight and win on this stage.
Are there other companies doing what Caelux is doing in the United States?
Well, I can't speak to specifically how they're doing it. I would say some are attempting to do so, and we've got some pretty solid IP as around our foundation. So we feel like we've built a pretty deep moat around the most cost-effective approach to producing perovskite on glass. So maybe they have to go about it differently than we do. I wish them luck because I think this whole industry really there's a lot of opportunity for everyone. So let's get after it.
Sure.
But we're excited about our relative position here. We feel that we're pretty far ahead of the game, and we're looking forward to just the next couple of years as we really scale this.
You said I just want to revisit the prediction you're making about market uptake of this technology. You said 35 or 45% by 2035, or what is that statistic?
Oh, it's 80% by 2040, and that's not my number. That's Rethink Energy Research, and they probably do some of the best work, I think, in the industry when it comes to looking at the perovskite market. They talk to everybody. They talk to us. They really have their finger on the pulse. And they're looking at the cost curves. They're taking a very bottoms-up view as well as a tops-down perspective and synthesizing the two and coming up with what I think is a pretty compelling argument around the uptake of this technology. They're seeing the pace of improvement. They're seeing the innovative companies that are coming out with approaches and go-to-market strategies that synergize with the industry, like our approach, not trying to fight it, trying to complement it.
Yeah.
And that supports this uptake approach. And so their view is like, look, the cost is going to come down so far. The performance is definitely going to improve. We have different tools available to us now than we did in PV 2.0. AI is playing a role, even for a little company like us. AI does play a role in our development work. And so that's enabling faster cycles of learning. And that's what really is helping to unlock the potential of this industry. And because of that, it's a substantial market, and we view it from our standpoint alone. Our addressable market's about $200 billion through 2030, from today through 2030, and that's just based upon new module sales, and that's a substantial market for anybody, right? So I think given that, it's pretty attractive, as well as, this longer term play beyond 2030. We'll really see mass adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. It's a huge economic opportunity. And that is an eye-popping statistic, 80% by 2040. I'm going to have to dig deeper into that research. They're very intriguing. Well, Scott, in our last couple of minutes together, what else should people know about Caelux and how can people find you?
No problem. So I think the one thing people should know is that perovskites are sooner than everybody thinks here in the U.S. It's going to happen, and that would be my one thing I want people to understand, that this is the technology of the future, and it's not that far off. It's not like other technologies where it's always 10 years away. This is technology that is literally around the corner. And so with that, this is a great opportunity to get on board with companies like Caelux. Now, how they can find us, so we're at www.caelux.com. That's CAELUX.com. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn, just Scott Graybeal.
Awesome. Well, check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. Reach out to me. I love hearing from my listeners on LinkedIn or at cleanpowerhour.com. And tell a friend about the show. That is the best thing you can do to help us speed the energy transition. I want to thank Scott Graybeal, CEO of Caelux, for coming on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tim. It was a pleasure.
Let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague. Hey, listeners. This is Tim. I want to give a shout out to all of you. I do this for you twice a week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time. I really appreciate you and what you're all about. You are part and parcel of the energy transition, whether you're an energy professional today or an aspiring energy professional. So thank you. I want to let you know that the Clean Power Hour has launched a listener survey, and it would mean so much to me if you would go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on the About Us link right there on the main navigation. That takes you to the About page, and you'll see a big graphic, Listener Survey. Just click on that graphic, and it takes just a couple of minutes. If you fill out the survey, I will send you a lovely baseball cap with our logo on it. The other thing I want our listeners to know is that this podcast is made possible by corporate sponsors. We have Chin Power Systems, the leading three-phase string inverter manufacturer in North America. So check out CPS America. But we are very actively looking for additional support to make this show work. And you see here our media kit with all the sponsor benefits and statistics about the show. We're dropping 2 episodes a week. We have now over 320,000 downloads on YouTube, and we're getting about 45,000 downloads per month. So this is a great way to bring your brand to our listeners, and our listeners are decision makers in clean energy. This includes project executives, engineers, finance, project management, and many other professionals who are making decisions about and developing, designing, installing, and making possible clean energy projects. So check out cleanpowerhour.com, both our listener survey on the About Us and our media kit, and become a sponsor today. Thank you so much. Let's grow solar and storage. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chinpowersystems.com to find out more.